Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this pre-recorded session on tips and tricks, ideas, suggestions, what the limited research is stating about remote learning, teaching ideas, strategies, etc. My name is Amjad Ali. I've been teaching for around 15, 16 years, and I work for myself 1 day a week on Fridays. So my business, my CPD delivery, my way of getting my message across has been remote since March. So although as a school we've only moved to real live lessons and remote teaching from this lockdown early January, it's something that I've been doing for a little while now in terms of personally. So I just wanted to share some of my insights, some of my outlooks, some of the really amazing, credible authors and practitioners out there, along with think tanks and research methodology around remote teaching and learning. So join me for around 40 to 45 minutes of suggestions. I'm going to fly through things, so feel free to obviously pause, rewind, watch again. There's also a function on YouTube where you can speed up somebody in how quickly you want to listen to them. So if I'm going a little bit too slow for you, speed me up or slow me down. There's lots of different features that you could use on YouTube, as this is a platform that I'll be sharing this to you in. I'm really glad that you've used this. Please, if relevant, keep this for yourself as personal use or departmental use, or of course, if the whole school use has been purchased, then this will be viewed by colleagues across the school. So with that in mind, let me just explain a little bit about what remote teaching might feel like. Now, we've all seen this clip before. We know Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I don't think it's ever been this accurate before in what teaching might look like at the moment.
Anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government.
So this is you asking questions while people's cameras are off, everyone's muted.
It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class?
So if your lessons have felt a little bit like that, let's think about what we can do to try to make them a little bit more invigorating, a little bit more joyous, get those light bulb moments back into our classroom, because who knows how long this is going to last. So just a little bit of information about me. I'm a teacher. Like mentioned, I've taught for about 15, 16 years. I hate to actually sit down and count. I'm a senior leader. I've been an assistant head teacher to start my 8th year. And the same amount of time, I've also been a qualified Senko, both operating as a strategic and operational Senko. And I am a consultant, whatever that word means. 1 day a week on Fridays, I deliver CPD and training as part of me being the founder of trythisteaching.com. So lots of strategies, lots of ideas, lots of tips that I share can be found for free on trythisteaching.com. No sign up, no registration, no adverts, no kind of PDF versions of things, always editable for you to use in your schools and platforms for free. I like to stress the teacher part because this is something that I'm doing. This is something that we're doing. This is something that day in, day out, 4 days a week is part and parcel of my life. So what do we need to know? What are we doing here? Why are we here? This is uncharted territory. I don't want to use unprecedented because it's been overused, especially in lots of TV briefings. What actually is effective teaching and learning? It's that $1 million question, isn't it? It doesn't matter what type of teacher you are, what type of kind of theories you regard around teaching, whether you're zero tolerance or whether you're restorative justice, whether you're a traditional or progressive, whatever those theories actually mean. We need to think about the mechanics of teaching. Lovely colleague called Kate Jones on Twitter put out a tweet recently around the idea that teaching is an art molded by the science. And I absolutely love that. This idea that it's an art created and shaped and formulated through science. So we need to think about the mechanics and the logistics and the science of teaching whilst involving the love, the passion, and the desire to get teaching absolutely where we need to get it to. So if we think about effective teaching and learning, never have routines, never have structure, never have teacher exposition, never have clarity of instructions, never have visual representations being more important than in remote teaching. Now, we need to always back everything that we say with as much evidence and research and thinking and theories as possible. Now, the Education Endowment Foundation has come up with these 5 points as summaries as to what would make good, effective remote teaching. Now, it's important to stress that research in this area is limited because it's been only practiced for a limited amount of time. Now, some people might say, well, what about open university or distant learning courses they've been going for a long time. But the reality is those have been for adult education. So in terms of children or young people's education, remote teaching and remote practices are relatively new, especially comparative to the field of face-to-face teaching, of course. Just as a point of reference, underneath this YouTube link, YouTube video, you could see links. I've shared this PowerPoint for you. Please click on the link to the PowerPoint and don't view it in full screen mode. Look at the notes section at the bottom where I've hyperlinked all of the relevant accompanying research and references. So if you wanted to read more, dig deeper, find out more, all of the links have been provided for you. Anytime that I've taken something from a blog or a website, I provided the full credible reference for those relevant people. So thank you to those colleagues who I've learned massively from. So the EEF states teaching quality is more important than how lessons are delivered. Now, let's think about this. What you do is more important than how you do it. So I like to think of the analogy of, it doesn't matter if you're driving a Ferrari or a Nissan Micra, no offense to both cars, obviously. If you're driving a Ferrari or a Nissan Micra, it's how you get to the destination. It's how safely you arrive to the destination. It's in what pieces you arrive to the destination. So thinking about teaching quality is more important than the lessons in how they're delivered. So we're talking about asynchronous lessons or synchronous lessons. We think about live pre-recorded. We think about platforms. EEF states it doesn't matter, it's what you do. That's really most crucial. EF also talk about number 2, ensuring access to technology is key, particularly for disadvantaged pupils. Now, the government's promised lots of laptops and they've delivered on many of those promises in many areas, and lots of schools have had to dip into their own budgets to ensure that laptops, Chromebooks, tablets, data, etc. is available for their young people. The access to the technology is absolutely vital. We need to be able to have students that can access what we are trying to deliver and how we're trying to deliver it. If you're not the relevant person in your school and you know people that need access, then push that up to those people. Ask them, what can we do to help? I'm that person in my school, so I get lots of requests. Can we support? Can we support? And we support every time, everywhere as possible. Peer interactions can provide motivation and improve learning outcomes. Absolutely. But if we think about our remote teaching practices, is one of the areas that probably we're most limited on and in and with, because we have less control. And the less control we have, the more resistant we are to deliver in those formats. Whereas in classrooms, we could say, talk to the person next to you, discuss with the person next to you, what do your table think, what do your group think? Whereas online, there are limitations with peer interactions, and also there are limitations with students wanting to peer interact more. But the EF study shows that actually it can provide an improvement in motivation and outcomes. Supporting pupils to work independently can improve learning outcomes. The old age question, independent learning, but how are we supporting the independent learning? It's not enough for us to say, load up a document, open up OneNote, open up your slides and complete the tasks. We need to be absolutely crystal clear and then supply the scaffolding and the support mechanisms to make sure that independent learning is successfully applied. And I'm not just talking about SEND students, okay, because that's not a homogenous group. We're talking about every student being able to access and work independently. And finally, probably most importantly, different approaches to remote learning suit different tasks and types of content. So there is an element of subject specificness in this. What will this subject allow for or cater for or need? And how will we make sure that that happens? Therefore, blanket ways of doing things might not be applicable for all school settings. Now, I've also linked for you Tom Sherrington's fantastic blog, where he talks about how we can adapt our curriculum in order for us to be able to really be successful with home and remote learning. Now, adapting your curriculum, not necessarily restarting again and redoing and replanning and reorganizing, but actually just thinking about where, when, and why. So if we start from plan the curriculum, What am I teaching? We all know that we have our long-term plans focused into our medium-term plans and then extrapolated into our lesson delivery on our short-term plans. So what am I teaching? What's the big picture? Weeks and then our small steps, long-term, medium-term, short-term. Then plan the inputs. This is where the adaptability needs to occur right now. Is this input going to be live? Is it going to be recorded? Is it going to be from an external source? Then we need to think about how are we now checking for engagement and understanding. So AFL has morphed a little to include engagement capabilities and engagement. And we need to consider what that is. Remember, don't confuse engagement with entertainment. We're looking at how much work and content is being applied, completed, and submitted. Therefore, our plans need to be tweaked. Is this going to be a live session that includes questioning? What kind of questioning? Chat questioning, quizzing, pre-formulated quizzing, live quizzing? How are we tweaking those adjustment strategies? Then we need to tweak our planned student tasks. So where we might have had a worksheet or a textbook or a website, is it now going to be research, short cycle of live, long cycle of independent and offline project work? How can we adapt to what we're delivering? Then, crucially, we need to think about what is our assessment and evaluation process. And as Tom's blog mentions here, we talk about which are and what are the review student questions, review student writing techniques that we are now going to use. Are we going to do this asynchronously or synchronously? Are we going to do this live? Are we going to do this collectively, independently? What mechanisms will we put in place to make that happen? And finally, whole class feedback sheets. Is this just manipulation into electronic formats? Are we going to be using live recorded formats? Are we going to use add-ons, bolt-ons, apps? What is it? So I've linked the blog for you. So thank you, Tom, for the summary and also the summary of the key information further explored too, for you to read at your own pleasure, and feel free to get in touch with Tom to thank him. I already have. What we need to think about then is what further research states. So government.gov.uk, Ofsted have talked about what's working well in remote education. Sutton Trust have also talked about research to do with learning in lockdown. And in particular, Education Endowment Foundation has also completed rapid evidence assessment of remote learning, which I've linked for you all. So please do have a little look. I particularly enjoy the EEF toolkit summaries, where you can see visual representations of the research at a glance. To pay careful attention to the Ofsted documentation, I'm not going to go through it, but there is a myth-busting section. They've got a kind of series of these myth-busting sections now where they talk about what schools shouldn't be assuming that Ofsted are wanting, and actually what does the evidence suggest. So do have a look at those, all referenced for you. Lots of really helpful indications of what we should and shouldn't do. Just as a final point, just as a kind of like personal situation, Education Endowment Foundation also in their rapid evidence assessment talks about how CPD and personal development is actually still necessary and also still productive, be it remotely. I mean, you're here now, so that might be an evidence format of it being a productive and effective format. So let's think about this. Doug Lemov's Teaching in the Online Classroom. I have it with me here. It's one of most recent books that I've purchased. Doug Lemov of Teach Like a Champion fame has put out this book, Teaching in the Online Classroom, and it's absolutely fantastic. I have no shares or no links or any affiliation with the book, but I'd really recommend people purchasing the book because it is very applicable not only to remote lessons and live lessons, but also to face-to-face lessons when we go back to school. There's lots of teach like a champion-esque strategies that are interwoven within this concept. So what I want to do is go through some of the main sections that Tom Sherrington has also summarized on his blogs for you all, and then hit you with a load of apps, add-ons, ideas, suggestions that you could use in your online classrooms and remote teaching. So firstly, the phrase, dissolve the screen. Ben Newmark has written a summary blog around teaching in an online classroom, and him and I both absolutely adore the phrase, dissolve the screen. This concept, get rid of the screen, get rid of that physical barrier, metaphorically make sure that it's just you and your students there again. And the way you could do that is through the following. So Doug talks about warm welcomes. So thinking about as students come in, think about your face-to-face interactions, greeting the students at the door, warm welcomes as they pop on every time somebody pops in, mentioning them by their name and greeting them. Hello, Stephen, good to see you. Hello, Abid, good to see you. Hello, Patricia, good to see you. Hello, Silviana, good to see you. And making sure that the students know that you are glad they are there, that you value them attending. Make sure you've got a do now activity available once you've done your greetings and your warm welcomes, and ensure that you dissolve the screen by using positive narration. Positive narration is this idea of running through what is happening well and making clear to everybody what is happening. So if I ask my students to load up the PowerPoint that I presented for them, excellent, I could see 50% of the class have loaded up the PowerPoint. This has massively jumped up to 75%. 100% of you have opened up my PowerPoint. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Now, pens in your hands, listening to my first question, and making sure your gestures and movements are exaggerated. The reason why they need to be exaggerated is because there might be a slight lag on some people's computers, maybe, possibly. And also you want to make it real clear point that you are here for them and they are there to listen to you in getting across your content. So not just thinking that you told them or shared it once or explained it once and that's it. Let's make it clear that you are here with warm welcomes, using names for clarity and personalization, providing them with an instant do now activity, and your positive narration coupled with your gestures and exaggerated movement will help dissolve the screen. What else can we do? Mr. Lemov, Doug talks about this in his chapters further down the line in terms of organizing the learning. Now, as you notice on the first slide that I presented when I started the presentation was a holding slide. So cameras off, microphones off. Have your key component information, key behavioral recommendations, expectations as available on the holding slides immediately as soon as students come in. It's the same way that we would expect the do now activity on the board as students enter your classroom. Have that expectation, that holding information available for your students. In Teams, for example, you can use lobbies or waiting rooms. On Google Meet, there isn't such a thing at the moment, but you could use a holding slide available. At that point, I leave my camera and my microphone off and the holding slide is on. As soon as students start entering, I start welcoming them with my microphone on. Use recall checks. Don't forget that the structure on retrieval and interleaving and sequencing is still paramount to effective learning. So Ebbinghaus forgetting curve hasn't gone away because we're now teaching remotely. The concept and ideas behind memorization and memory recall still apply. So ensure that you use retrieval checks. I've linked a blog of mine about retrieval and recap at the bottom of this slide too. Ensure that all verbal instructions are coupled with written instructions and vice versa. So ensure all written instructions are coupled with verbal instructions and use imagery where appropriate and where applicable. Make sure throughout your presentation there are pause points. Now, it's important to remember this because sometimes when we're delivering synchronous live lessons, for example, we might think, actually, I've just got to roll it through, rattle it through. I don't know what my students are thinking. Are they still with me? Are they still listening, etc.? So pause points are absolutely vital. And then, of course, Doug talks about tracking tools. How can we ensure that we're seeing students are doing things, are completing things, are finishing things, are starting things? And there's some ideas that I'll share with you shortly around those areas. Further on in the book, Doug talks about checking for understanding. Now, he uses cold calling, which is, of course, a teach like a champion strategy as well, which some of us might just know or recognize as hands down questioning. So I would always say to my students, cameras off, microphones off when I call your name. If you want, if it's safe to do so, cameras on, but microphones must come on and you must refer to my answer. If I don't get a response from a student, I might say, call them a couple of times, their screen might be frozen, so I'd say, I'm removing you to just restart you. If they come back and they're still not responding, I would then remove them from the lesson and contact parents to say, actually, they weren't participating in the lesson. So participation is not optional. You wouldn't opt in to participate in my face-to-face lesson. Therefore, in my synchronous lesson, I need your participation too. Pre-call is an idea that Doug talks about in the book. Again, another teach like a champion strategy in terms of pre-calling and suggesting to students that you will be asking them questions on X, Y, Z. Weight questions are really important as well. So giving processing time. So thinking about, like I said, not the homogeneous SEND group, but some of your SEND specific students that have and need necessary processing time. On Teams, for example, you can use like function and a polling function. So use multiple choice questions in your lessons. Multiple choice questions arguably are one of the strongest forms of questioning, as long as you use a plausible answer, a relative misconception, and the correct answer. When teaching and checking for understanding, re-explain and recheck. Okay, don't just assume just because you've said it once. Be as clear as you like to think that they will understand. And therefore ask repetition, which is my one that's been added in terms of when I set a task, when I explain the time, when I explain the noise level, when I explain what is expected, I ask at least 3 students to tell me back what it is that I've asked them to do. So what else can we do in terms of theory, in terms of practice? We need to understand the distinction between synchronous, i.e. live lessons, and asynchronous, i.e. pre-recorded lessons. So synchronous lessons are this idea that you are delivering there face-to-face in real time. And you need to emphasize personal engagement. So i.e., are you here? Are you with me? Raise your hand, lower your hand, click like, comment on the chat, etc. Check for understanding throughout your live lessons. Make sure that they can tap into the fact that you as an expert are there. When chatting, use names and continue with your positive narration. Now, there are lots of different ways that you could use shared documents, and I've hyperlinked Tom Sherrington's blog at the bottom where he gave a fantastic suggestion about multi-slide access to all students and then live tracking of work. Absolutely phenomenal. I've used it in my lessons. It's brilliant. So thank you again, Mr. Sherrington, for that. Make sure we stress everybody submits. So even if you work in your book, you take a picture, you show the work, you make sure that everybody submits. It's not an optional lesson. You're not opting in to do this. This is part and parcel of our delivery to you. Your legal requirements, our legal requirements, we must get it done. Now, asynchronous is interesting because some schools have chosen asynchronous, some have chosen synchronous, some chose part synchronous, part asynchronous. Whatever you do, remember the EF toolkit says it doesn't matter what you do, it's how you do it. Okay, so in short, despite it being pre-recorded, you aim for depth and rigor. This is a pre-recorded session. I won't make assumptions that it needs to be dumbed down or reduced in content or depth and rigor. I also am talking as if I'm live, as if I'm talking to you right now, which is really important in a pre-recorded session because students don't want to feel like it was a has been done or past show of something. So talk as if it is live. Signal pause point. So if you want students to consolidate agency and consolidate what you're asking them to do, when you're asking them to do something, make it clear. So shortly, I would like you to pause the video clip. Pause it for 6 minutes. Use a timer there and ensure that you complete the task set. After the 6 minutes, resume and I will carry on. Then you pause. Thank you for joining me back. And we carry on with the lesson. Make sure task lists are repeated. So don't just assume just because you demonstrated it or shown it once that the students will be able to understand and be able to remember and recall exactly what you've asked them to do. So repetition from you is also vital and necessary. As Graham Nuttall talks about in Hidden Lives of Learners, he says that understanding and teaching must be explored in at least 3 different contexts for it to be truly embedded. So if we're doing this remotely live, this is a new context once, and new and once. So we're thinking about what that looks like. Again, Doug talks about using shared docs for tasks, and Tom's ideas on shared docs is fantastic. And he's crowdsourced a load of ideas, which I've hyperlinked for everybody at the bottom. And check work after your pre-recorded session. And a suggestion is then to demonstrate and show good work at the start of your next lesson. So if you've got a live lesson next, you then say, here's examples of good work that I've seen, I've spotted, I've provided feedback on, to show that even though you weren't there, it was pre-recorded, you're still there by looking at feedback and looking at tasks. So really important. So at this point, I'd like you to pause. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video clip after my explanation, and I want you to do the following. I want you to decide, based on the information that I've just explained to you through Doug Lemov, through Tom Sherrington, through EEF Toolkit, through Ofsted myth-busting document, what will you now try, what will you now refine, and what will you now ditch? So when I say try, I mean, what will you now do new that you wasn't doing before? What would you now refine that you were kind of doing, you were possibly doing, and you've kind of forgotten it, it's fallen by the wayside? And what will you now ditch? What will you now stop doing? Because actually you don't or you shouldn't do those things. Reflect on those in terms of short, medium, and long. What do I need to try short term? What do I need to try medium term? What do I need to try long term? And continue that for refine and continue that for ditch. That should take you 6 minutes. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes per item, 2 minutes for try, 2 minutes for refine, 2 minutes for ditch. When you've finished, resume the video clip. Thank you for joining me back. Right, Teams or Google. I'm not here. I don't have any shares or any hidden investment in any of these two platforms, although I wish I did invest in Zoom, for example, pre-lockdown. Teams or Google, whichever platform you're using, what I want to do is just blitz through some ideas. Personally, we use Google, therefore my bias is stemming towards Google and my knowledge is more Google focused, but that's not to say that the websites and suggestions that I use to you will be solely focused on Teams or Google's. Obviously, we've got this is pre-recorded, so you could flick through past the Google ones or Teams ones if you don't want to listen to them or see them. That's not a problem. So first thing that we need to understand is that either on Google Meet or Teams, you can change your background. Now I've linked for you at the bottom of this slide 2 websites. So the Teams website and the support website for Google Meets on how you could change your background. So you could change your background to be fuzzy, you could change your background to be on the beach, whatever. But just think about kind of distraction elements, distraction modes. If you're showing a screen and you're there meant to be sat on a beach with a changed background, will that actually cause more of a detriment than a support mechanism? So ensure you know how to change your background and whether your background needs to be changed. Also, make yourself familiar with these icons, the microphone icon, the camera icon, the close and start or end call, video call icon. It might sound ridiculously easy, but lots of people don't understand that this actually ends the call rather than ends the video, or ends the call rather than ends the mute. These are the shortcuts that you could use, and I've hyperlinked a thread that I put out on Twitter on lots of different ICT hacks that you can use in your lessons for your lessons. So we all know Control C, Control V, or if you're on a MacBook, Command C, Command V, Command Z, things like that. But there's lots of different ones that you could use for online platforms such as Slides, OneNote, presentation tools, etc. So if you are fairly advanced at Google Drive or Microsoft Teams, Google has Google apps, Microsoft had apps and Google has add-ons. Now, apps and add-ons focus and format in the same kind of thing, which is this idea of other additional mechanisms that will help streamline and make things and productivity more effective. So I have add-ons for my systems such as Duelless for Google Meet. So Google Duelless, it allows you to split your screen if you haven't got two physical streams. I've also got Google add-ons such as Add to Google Classroom. And again, I've hyperlinked some examples for you at the bottom. The Chromebook extensions and the Chrome extensions are absolutely wonderful. You could get stuck in a rabbit hole of finding lots and lots of add-ons, but they are some really significant ones. Just bear in mind, schools might place them on their blocked list, so you would need to contact their administrators to ask them to place them on the white list, and then you could add them to your Chrome. Now, if these are making absolutely no sense to you, don't worry, don't panic. You don't need these to be able to deliver effective remote teaching. But if you are at the point where you're thinking, right, I need to step up the delivery and integrate some other elements, you can use add-ons. Apps are exactly the same. Microsoft Teams has their own versions of things. So instead of add-ons, they have apps. So the three that I think are really, really powerful and useful are Stream, Poly, and Karma. So Stream allows for seeing visually which collective activities and submissions are being made. Poly allows for effective organization of files and structures. And Karma is one that you can actually buzz up your colleagues and employees by powering up their voting up system for other friends and colleagues. I guess it's an electronic shout out board, so to speak. Again, I've hyperlinked some links for you at the bottom of the slides. So here is a quick fire blitz of websites that you can use to help explain, explore, use, determine, feedback, engage, whatever for your classes. And these are irrespective of Microsoft apps, Google add-ons, Google Teams, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, whatever. These are just web-based platforms that you could use. So Mentimeter.com is an online data software system, I guess, where you can ask a question, for example, what sectors are in the audience, and people can live respond. So all they do is they follow the instructions. They go to menti.com, they type in the room code, and the question pops up and they could give a response. You get live responses, and the number of responses is written at the bottom here. You then, as the person has set up the questions, can export the questions as a PDF and then upload it into a future lesson. So if you're recording or pre-recording, you could still use Mentimeter.com. it's very powerful. I use it in CPD sessions lots of times. Other websites that you could use are Padlet.com. Now, Padlet has been around for a long time. It's morphed into a really powerful tool. You can upload video clips, links, you can embed things, and it's really powerful as a collective online corkboard where people can all pin in things. You could restrict it to just your page or group. You could add a password protection to it. You can get students to comment on pieces of work. You can check for comments before they become live. There's lots of functionality and a really useful website. On my website, trythisteaching.com, I put a summary of how Padlet works and some examples of Padlets that I've used that I've hyperlinked for you at the bottom. Other websites that you could use are whiteboard.fi, which is an online mini whiteboard system for all of your classes. It's actually really fun, really useful. It is a subscription-based website, but the free platform works well enough for what we need to do temporarily. Whiteboard.fi then allows for instant live checking for understanding, as Doug was talking about, tracking engagement and tracking understanding. You could use whiteboard.fi as a website that will help with those areas. Quizlet.com is an online quizzing website where you can upload your quizzes. Good thing about Quizlet is if you upload, say, for example, a business studies quiz and you wanted others to use it, you can leave it available for others to use it. So I found some really useful quizzes on Quizlet.com, and when I've created some, I've left them for others as a kind of karma-based system I've taken so somebody can take from me. So Quizlet.com, multiple choice question elements, like I said, arguably are the strongest form of questioning. So think about how you could use these self-marking, self-assessing tools to assess for learning. Quizzes is the same kind of version, but more of a gamification element of it within Quizzes. Quizzes can also be done on the phone, can also be done on a tablet, and it makes it more of a game-like setting for us to use. So do check out Quizzes. Our students in particular do enjoy Quizzes.com. Kahoot, you'll remember when teachers were using those paper signs and they had to then scan the signs and figure out who's answered what. Kahoot have now made a web-based version using the same principles, and it is a lot of fun in terms of engagement, actually in terms of engagement and output level. So have a check of Kahoot. So again, like to stress, the last few websites, they're not Teams or Google Meet specific or Google Classroom specific. They are web-based platforms to help put in place some of the strategies that Doug talks about in teaching in an online classroom. This is, however, a Google Meet / Google Classroom specific area, which is Jamboard, which is quite similar to whiteboard.fi, but it's integrated to your Google Classrooms. So if you're running a Google Meet live session or pre-recorded session, you can actually start a Jamboard by clicking on the options section in the Google Meet and click Jamboard. You can then give students the opportunity to edit or just view or add or just comment, and you can set an individual Jamboard screen for each of the students. So you can see here 3 out of 20. So I could simultaneously click through and live check what is happening, what they're doing, what they're completing, or what they're not doing, or what they're not completing. So jamboard.google.com is an interesting, relevant access point for us to try in our lessons. What we could also do is, and I've hyperlinked my website's address at the bottom of this, if you are recording asynchronous lessons and you do want students to listen to your voice while you talk over a PowerPoint, and you don't necessarily want your face in there because your hair looks as bad as mine, for example, you can use online recording tools that PowerPoint has within them. And if you're not sure how it works, I've referenced how to do that there. And also an online platform called Loom allows you to pop up in a little circle on the bottom left and talk through and talk over a PowerPoint without needing to be there physically to deliver. You could also remove your face or make your face bigger or turn yourself into an emoji, which I've linked later on. So if you don't want to show your face, you don't have to, but there are online recording software tools. I remember when I had to do this a few years ago, I'd have to screen record, then snip, and then upload, and then change the format. There's so many integrated systems available for free. Loom for educators is free. Narration on Microsoft PowerPoint, as long as you've got at least the last 3 versions of Microsoft PowerPoint, is again free. So always looking for the free versions of things. Just as a side note, all of those previous websites have paid versions, and it's up to you whether you want to use the paid versions, but the free versions for me have worked well so far. But some of them, it wouldn't be a problem if you did wanted to invest in the paid versions. Same like Flipgrid, free version and a paid for version. Flipgrid is actually really powerful because it allows you to do more than just like Padlet, where you upload a video clip or something. This actually allows you to upload a video clip of yourself and students to do the same. So in a refined area, in a controlled setting, they could then upload themselves delivering a speech, mentioning a phrase, or talking through an answer, or reading a book, or you reading a book, and it could collectivize those uploads into a corkboard system for those video clips. So for oracy, really powerful. For pronunciation, really powerful. For MFL, maybe for PE teachers, seeing and accessing sport development, etc. Drama practice rehearsals. Think about how you could use flipgrid.com. Nearpod is essentially, I'm not an expert in Nearpod at all. I'm not an expert in any of them, of course, but Nearpod, not one that I've used explicitly myself, but it is a team-specific element, similar to Flipgrid, similar to Padlet, similar to Whiteboard Fee, but integrated amongst it. All of those things are there. So you can see how you can use Nearpod for teams, and you can integrate all of these icons that have been demonstrated in this image. So have a check out of Nearpod as an app for Microsoft Teams to use as part of your delivery. Something that is often a hindrance for us when delivering lessons or asking, or especially in asynchronous lessons pre-recorded, when we say to them, and visit the website and make sure you download the link or click on the link, is when some of the links are so complex. Some of them are like bit.ly/2kx lowercase j lowercase k uppercase L uppercase x. And students are like, what does that mean? I can't remember that. With bit.ly, you can actually copy and paste the link and then rename the link. So you can rename the link to actually be something more specific. So I can rename all of that complex link to bit.ly/Mr. Ali's revision classroom. And that way students will be able to remember the link significantly more easily than a more complex link. So see if you could use that. Again, free version and paid versions available for that. This is team specific, but actually I'm not, sorry, this is Microsoft Google Classroom. Let me start all of that again. So this is one of the powers of recording asynchronous lessons. You can make mistakes, and it's okay to just say, let me start that again, apologies. So let me start that again. Digital graphic organizers are Google Classroom specific, okay? They're not team relevant or not Teams integrated, but I had a little play, and actually they can be. So if you open up the link that I provided for you at the bottom of this slide, it will show you various digital graphic organizers. So pre-structured worksheets that the students would populate, but then it creates them on Microsoft Draw, which is a Google specific area, but you could actually transfer them over to Microsoft Teams by actually just copying and pasting into the relevant Teams association. So have a little play of that, but if you haven't, if that doesn't work, apologies, but Google Classroom, this is really fantastic. Ditch That Textbook have got lots of these facilities available for us for free. Other areas, so a team-specific app is Visio. Have a look at Visio because it creates hierarchical structure and organizational structures for your graphics and for your tasks. It's something that you've got to be fairly advanced, I guess, to be using Microsoft Teams, but Visio, for someone that is quite a fay with Microsoft Teams, is good with the apps and good with the add-ons. You can integrate Visio as part of your delivery. Have a little play with that. And finally, in terms of just generic apps and websites, etc., Icons by Noun project is absolutely fantastic in presenting ideas visually for us. So again, there's a free version and a paid version. Just a little tip, let them know you're an educator. They're fantastic at providing a type of discount for educators. So see if you could use Icons by Noun project to visually represent your oral and auditory instructions that are written also on your screen and your board. So Icons by Noun project, have a little look. Don't forget, it doesn't matter if you're there or face-to-face and you're talking to them, make use of timers, make use of timing, make use of noise levels. So explain to students, you will have 5 minutes to complete this task. I'm going to turn my camera off and mute my microphone, and I want you to finish and submit before the timer is up. Vary your timer structures so they don't become part and parcel of the background, but don't forget to use timers and explain why the time has been given for a task to be completed. The TES have put together top 13 list of things that Teams has that people probably didn't know. So Teams hacks, I've just summarized them to 10 that I thought were really good. I've linked the TES article at the bottom of the slides, of course. Teams has something that Microsoft Google Classroom doesn't have, which is polls. Polls are fantastic. You can ask a question and get a feedback point from all of the students. Also, like Google Meet and Teams, you can turn off notifications. Don't be drowned by notifications. It's a bit like emails. There's no point saying, well, I might miss something. If you're not free to get what you're missing, you would be missing it anyway. So check your notifications when you can, like you check your emails when you can. Like the like button. So in the chat function, you can get students to like the button or the questions. So you can say, for example, which is the right answer? Is it A, B, C? They can like which one they think is the right answer. Print screen and paste, so you can actually print screen the screens for them, paste the example of the print screen and say, now off you go and answer the questions using the image that's just been shared with you. You can do lots of other things that I've listed for you there. You could double your screen, like Google Meet has dual-less. They have a double your screen function as well. And email reminders can go out to repeat your lessons. You could download participants list, and there's Notes app, which is really fantastic as well. So have a little look and a play with these areas for you to think about how you can upskill yourself in Microsoft Teams. Finally, in terms of web purchase websites, I've linked for you my website there, where I've collated over the years a load of subject-specific websites that apply, that we can use both on and offline for our students. If you know any more, it is an open Google Doc. Please do add some more. So again, a link has been provided for you to check out and try. So just to wrap up, I'm just going to blitz through some final suggestions on what you can use. Moat is an online add-on for Google Classroom, which allows for verbal feedback. So you can literally click on Moat, and Moat will then allow you to verbalize your feedback. This will save you time, lots of time, because you can just talk through the feedback that you want to give rather than having to type every bit of feedback. So have a little look at Moat, pause this screen here, look at instructions and make yourself familiar with Moat. Also with Google Classroom, make yourself familiar with the privacy settings. So pause the screen here and have a look and ensure that you know that you can change the settings of whether students can share their screens or whether they could send messages. In the chat function, both for Teams and Microsoft and Google Classroom, you can toggle on and off whether they can send messages or not. So make that your friend. Make sure you know where the settings are. Google Forms or Forms online for Teams and Google Classroom are really, really powerful. So whichever format you use, pre-made quizzing type forms allow you to already check for answers. Comprehension quizzes allow you to share the answers with them, the correct answers, give live feedback without you having to do that individually. So you just pre-populate the information. So pause the screen here, look at how you can upload the quizzes to Google Classroom, for example, and what you can do to make those forms happen. So you can give various settings that will allow limit to one response, collect email addresses, miss correct answers, correct points values, etc. So it takes the in time, but the output to the time ratio is fantastic. So see how you could use those in your lessons. A format of Microsoft Teams is that you have a breakout room function, and I've linked the Microsoft support website that will give you more guidance around how to use breakout rooms. Only issue with breakout rooms is you can't record in individual breakout rooms. It only records a home screen. So think about how you can keep to safeguarding recommendations and requirements within breakout rooms. Google Meet, if you pay for a provision, you can also have breakout rooms, but not all schools have purchased this provision, of course. So think about how you could use breakout rooms. Essentially, breakout rooms are many kind of corridors that students can go in and sit in together. So remember the E of Toolkit's recommendations. Number 3, peer interactions can motivate and probably enhance learning. So would breakout rooms suffice for this area? Would that support with peer interactions? How can we make that work and make that happen? I've linked for you here. Lindsay Skinner has put together fantastic daily check-in forms that are editable. You just click on a link and it creates these daily check-in forms so you can see how students are. You could edit them. Really, really powerful, really, really helpful document that's available for you. Again, think about how much you know and how much you played around with things. It's one of those old school things where click on those buttons and see what those buttons do. Do we know the difference between a doc, a slide, a sheet, a drawing, a form? What's the difference between a form and a drawing? What's the equivalent of Microsoft Teams? Is a form a quiz? Is a slide a PowerPoint? Is a doc Word document? What does it mean? So make sure you become enhanced with your knowledge on what those are. So do you know how to embed videos, embed timers? Is a video embedded through YouTube or a file? How complex is this material? How easy is this material? My top tip would be, ironically, to YouTube what it is that you want to know. So I've YouTube before. How do I embed videos from YouTube onto my PowerPoint? And YouTube taught me how to embed YouTube videos onto my PowerPoint. So think about how you can use the summaries already available out there for us. If you use Google Meet, it's really, really important to remember that you must reset the Google Meet. Otherwise, students can continue on your Google Meet after you've left. So there's a setting that talks about generate Google Meet. We always recommend leaving this off, and also resetting Google Meet to ensure that students don't remain on there without it being recorded, for example. I think for you some general teacher hacks. So for example, the techie teacher.net talks about how you could turn your image into emoji. My emoji will look significantly better than my tired, overgrown hair looked face. So think about how you could use that, and tons of other strategies, but I don't want to overload you with tons more. I know I've hit you with lots and lots of information, but those are some kind of quick fire ways to touch for engagement, to talk about encouragement, to get interaction, and think about those 5 summary points from the EEF. Remember, the thing is right now, we're all in the same boat, we're all learning, so there isn't any real experts out there. So talk to your colleagues, talk to your peers, talk to other teachers, and find out what they're doing. But let me close on one thing, which is really important. Reflection is about looking at a mirror, not through a window. So think about what you need to improve on, not what others are doing around you, not others are working on how they're doing it and what they're doing. So my name is Amjad Ali. I'm on AST Support Ali on Twitter. I really hope this has been useful for you. If I could help you in any shape or form in any other way, I have various other pre-recorded CPD sessions. Get in touch, send me a little tweet, or drop me an email from our website, trythisteaching.com. Thank you very much. Look after yourself. Stay safe.